We're now going to move on to the third part of today's hangout, which is about. It's an interesting question, this one, and it's the idea that should my employees be using social media? Many organizations are concerned about the risks, the complexity. I think we all know lots and lots of social media horror stories, and so I think it's a question that many owners of businesses or many marketeers or people working in businesses are concerned about is, should I be encouraging my use of social in the workplace? Neil, perhaps I could turn to you first. How is social media encouraged in the workplace in Barclays Print?
Do you know, Paul, we're a long-term business. We're over 60 years old, and we've got a very loyal workforce. And I'm very confident that the people that we work with would be entirely capable of engaging with social media in an appropriate way. We already encourage our client-facing staff to ensure that they use LinkedIn appropriately. The next thing that I probably want to do in the business would be to use Twitter as a client feedback forum. I'm genuinely happy that 90% of the time, 90% of our clients are happy with what we do. And if that happened, clearly they're not all my clients personally, I would expect our people to also engage in that process. And so I'm very comfortable with the idea of, we already empower the people to take control of their own decision making, and I'm really comfortable that so long as we engage with setting the intentions, and we're confident and understood we couldn't control the message, I would have absolutely no issue whatsoever with our people, and we would then be mentoring and working with and ensuring they understood what the process was and what we were all trying to achieve through it. I would have no problem at all with our people engaging with social media on behalf of the business.
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think it's so interesting. I think that's a really key learning for people watching at home, and understanding, the importance, Neil, if I may paraphrase you there, of having, trusting our people, giving them the time, as you made the point earlier about that, this takes time, giving them the right tools. Lauren talked about using desktop alerts and so on, using a mobile phone, but also the training in place. I mean, supporting them, as you've said. Jamie, if I might turn to you now. Jamie, is training manager for Manpower. It's a large business. There's 1,000 people in the UK. Jamie, if I could ask you this, how is social media supported at Manpower?
Well, again, I think it's developed over time a little, Paul, but certainly at the beginning, and I echo some of the concerns and legitimate concerns that Neil's talked about, which aren't so much around about trusting our people and so on, but about providing them with a tool, but making sure we supported it. And I think that's very much, as an organisation, what we try to do is to have a plan. Once we'd embraced the idea of the benefits of social media, and we've talked a lot about those already, once we'd embraced those, made a decision, I think what we did was put in place some central support for people so that they had some answers to the questions like, how much time should I be spending on this? What are the do's and don'ts? What are the best practice tips and advice? And I think as an organisation we put together a good central package for that. Some initial training at the beginning and some support from yourselves, for example, and the marketing team. But we've also made those tools available on an ongoing basis. The training team, for example, have incorporated some of that training into what we do. That keeps it alive for new people coming into the business, and also manages those processes that you were talking about on an ongoing basis. I think we've created a big toolkit that we've hosted and made available internally for all of our people. Yeah. And then more latterly, people like Lauren, our game changers, our champions, if you will, who are there really as a kind of help and support system to help people get the most out of social media without having to spend all their day in it. And so far it's worked. I think the benefits have so outweighed the risks that I think Manpower look back now and think that what we did was a very sensible decision.
Great. And Jamie, one example I think of that is that Lauren touched on before as well, is that you've, Neil made the point about, about identifying successes, and I think one thing that you've done there is that you've shared those success stories, haven't you? Kind of, when people have done good stuff, it's been shared, and I think that's...
Yeah, I think we have found some good ways of doing that. The Twitter feeds to make those instant messages come to life right across our internal and to some extent our external network. but also, the social media tools on LinkedIn. They're not the only ways of communicating. It doesn't mean we don't do some of the other things that we used to do before, but I think they've added an extra dimension to showing people what success you can have and how you can do it in a very good, productive way.
Fantastic. Jamie, thank you so much for sharing that. One key point that Jamie made there is about the need to have a plan and guidelines in place, John. And I think that is an important lesson for people watching this, thinking about whether their employees should be using social media, John, is to make sure that there's some good guidelines in place.
Exactly, and I think what's important to know is that the guidelines take various shapes and forms. You see here I've got a social media policy database up. And again, these can be directed at many, many different levels. If you're a big business, the chances are your employees are already on social, flying the banner on behalf of your company. But guidelines shouldn't aim to repress them doing this. They should aim to give them some clear direction as to what they should be saying and how they should be acting. And in fact, some organisations who are doing it particularly well are turning their individual employees into advocates for their brand.
So as Neil rather gave the example of his people, getting guidance on anyone who's client facing using LinkedIn in a professional way, you mean actually organizations are beginning to proactively encourage and give people the tools to go out and promote the company, promote the service, promote the charity, promote whatever they're doing.
Exactly. I think one of the most interesting points is when whatever kind of organisation you work for, people get a lot of visibility. So again, if I'm looking at my own employees' profiles, I want to ensure that they have a nice little paragraph about my business to explain exactly what it does.
Okay. And that's socialmediagovernance.com. John was looking at there with some examples of different policies, which is a great starting point if you're thinking about using social media in your business and you'd like to have some guidelines in place, which we've established are very, very important. Lauren, we've made the point, I think everyone understands this, that John's talked about advocacy, Jamie started to talk about training our people up, and any firm watching this, whether big or small, building that efficiency, is a key role. Now, your job at Manpower, one of your roles is as a game changer to help build that proficiency. How is that? Is it an easy thing to do, or is it a hard thing to do?
Okay, I'll be honest with you, Paul. I think because of people's varying levels of ability and to some degree interest in social media, I think there's been a mixed bag. I won't say it's been a complete walk in the park, but one of the key points that I focused on as a game changer was getting people to see the value and understand the value to them in their professional capacity, and to get to talk about what they want to achieve, what would be the ideal value they could pull from social media. And once they started to understand that, then their desire to want to learn about how to use the tools, it became much easier to engage with them. And we're certainly making traction. I think one of the most, or should I say, the key drivers to their engagement has been the successes. So when people they're receiving success from using it, we're sharing that, using the groups, the internal groups that we've set up, Twitter, etc. And when somebody sees somebody else with some success from this, they're wanting to engage even more. So, but back to I think a couple of points earlier in the conversation, around the governance and the guidelines and things, putting people in a game changer type role, if you like. Whether you can afford as a large organisation to put 2 or 3 people, whether it's just one person if you're a small SME, having somebody who is responsible for supporting and guiding your business on social media, I think is important, because I think there does need to be a certain level of control to ensure people are using it correctly. But I think if you do have somebody supporting it, people can turn to me to ask me the questions that perhaps they wouldn't want to ask their bosses about, because they want to feel like they understand and know what's going on. So more and more people are engaged and more people are using it within our business.
Fantastic. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing that. So I think, really interesting there in terms of some of the learnings in terms of, it takes time, the importance to have a plan in place. There is real value there for all businesses of all sizes and all types of sectors. Some of the stuff that happens is just fantastic. But, as Lauren made the point there, really helping your employees understand what's in it for them. What's in it for the business, yes, but what's in it for them as an individual in terms of development, in terms of making them more successful in their job, whatever they do, is really, really important. Neil, the final point of the day, I'd like to turn to you. What advice would you give to companies who are just setting out on their social media journey?
Do you know, Paul, it's been very interesting discussion, and I've gained quite a lot of things. I've certainly been reminded that we already have an online profile as people and businesses, whether we realise that or not, or whether we did anything about that or not. It's reminded me that we need to put the right amount of time in, both to our own individual presence and also ensuring that our people that we work with put the right amount of time in to manage that presence appropriately. It's given me the enthusiasm to do more, particularly for the business. In our during our conversation today, I've had a couple of great pieces of client feedback that until this point only I knew about. And if I dealt with my Twitter feed appropriately before, all of my clients and anybody that was interested in this could have known about it. So it's certainly given me the enthusiasm to do more. And it's taught me that whilst we as a business need to put the customer first, my personal profile is part of my business profile. And if somebody searches for me, they're going to be searching for the business or vice versa.
Fantastic. Neil, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and I really hope those of you watching this Ask Manpower Hangout have taken some really interesting learnings from businesses of all shapes and sizes about the art of it. So it just comes to me now to sincerely thank the coughing members of our Hangout. Jamie, Training Manager of Manpower, thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Neil from Barclays Print. Neil, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
Lauren, Game Changer at Manpower.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much. And John, my colleague. So thank you very much for joining us today. Just to remind you, there's a networking guide that's available in a beautiful printed version or a downloadable version from manpowergroup.co.uk/better access. This has been Ask Manpower. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good afternoon.